And so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second North Sales Lightning webinar. Appreciate you guys all being here this afternoon. It's a little bit of a kind of an overcast, cold, rainy day here in Connecticut, but again, appreciate you guys being on board and spending a little bit of your Friday afternoon with us. I want to make sure that my compatriot Allan Terhune is with us here. Make sure his connection is good. Al, you on board?
Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm hanging in there, hanging in there. You know, I could go for a little warm weather, but other than that, we're doing okay. So anyway, just want to give everybody a little bit of time to get out of the waiting room and into the meeting room here. But hopefully we get just a few more minutes. We've kind of done a few of these webinars and we find out that people kind of check in at the last minute. So we're just give everybody a minute to get in because the next slide, I want to bring in my first guest, sort of an unannounced guest, if you will. And what I've asked is our class executive director, the class executive secretary, Laura Jeffers, to join us. Laura, are you here?
I am. Thank you, Brian.
All right. Well, Laura, you know, I wanted to have you on board here because you and I have talked a little bit about, you know, the importance of using these webinars to kind of reach out to some of the folks who we may not be able to get to about class membership. So I was hoping you maybe could introduce yourself and maybe share some of the stuff of getting some folks renewing their memberships and where we are at with the class right now.
Certainly. Thanks, Brian. I am Laura Jeffers, and I am your executive secretary for the Lightning class. And I'm happy to be here and serve all the members of the class. And first, I want to take the opportunity to thank North Sales for setting up these great webinars and giving us a great opportunity to spend an hour or so with our friends talking about lightning sailing. So thank you. But really, getting to my agenda item, class dues and membership support are going to be really important this year. The stronger our class is as a whole helps to protect your investment in your boats, and membership dues make up a big portion of the budget. And so we really need your help this year on the membership and fleet level dues. And if you are in a position, in addition to dues, to make an additional gift to one of our funds, we invite you to do that as well. This year, the boat grant program is going to be investing in a lot of equipment upgrades over last year and this year, and we could really use the additional help. And we'll also be expanding our Lightning Lab program to include more of the digital learning opportunities. So if you are able to, we invite you to come and support the class.
Thanks, Laura. You know, you guys have done a great job. Obviously, we've had a few Zoom meetings for the class because of where we are right now in the current environment. And I know we've had some great participation in that. I know folks are interested in hearing about lightning sailing, hearing about how the class is doing. And so appreciate all the work you've done for the class and keeping things together. And for sure, guys, if you get a window of opportunity after this webinar, get together with your fleets, make sure your fleet dues are sent in, make sure your annual dues are sent in. And we wanted to get Laura on board so folks who haven't been able to engage with her can kind of put a name to a face and kind of make sure that you know who you're sending your money to. So Laura, thanks again, and we will connect with you. Well, if it's like any other day, probably next day or two. So, all right, be safe down there, and our best of will.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks.
So real quick, again, appreciate again Laura coming on board. We tried a little different plea to make sure you guys are out there supporting the class. So thank you very much. Again, Allan Terhune and myself are kind of presenting this. We have three incredible guests, and I'm going to kind of introduce them, make sure the three of them are on board here with us. And the first one is Matt Fisher. And Matt, I want to make sure your connection's good and you're on board.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks for inviting me.
I appreciate you being here. As you guys can see, Matt's a three-time North American champion, 2009 world champion, and the 1974 junior North American champion. We'll get to some details on that a little bit Next one up we have is Jeffrey Hayden. Jeff, you coming to us live from Florida, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you spending some time with us. I know Jeff is, as everybody probably knows, the 2018 Junior World Champion, the 2017 Junior North American runner-up, and also, and maybe even more importantly, is an ILCA Vice President of the Southern Circuit. So again, Jeff, thanks for spending a little bit of time with us and getting through your finals, and congratulations on your impending graduation from Florida State University. So
Thank you.
and last but not least is Doug Wake. Doug, I want to make sure you're online as well.
All good?
Awesome. So Doug, as you guys can see, is a two-time Junior North American champion, holds that distinction with a few other incredibly talented sailors, 2018 Sears Cup champion, and a longtime server on the ILCA governing board and current ILCA Vice President of Marketing. So again, I appreciate you guys all being here today. You know, one of the things that as we got going, and Al and I kind of started putting this together and got Matt and Doug and Jeff kind of involved with this, we got together on a bunch of calls, and the plan was, well, let's put together a kind of a blueprint for what a successful Lightning Junior program might be. And it took a bunch of different directions, and we kind of sat down and had a bunch of different calls, and we call them kind of practice sessions and dry runs, and we kind of whittled it down to about 3 hours, I think, with all the stuff that we were covering. And because these guys had so much good information and good stories about how they got where they got and how their programs worked. And so we kind of tried to bullet point them. So the first portion of this webinar is going to be a little bit broken down to each one of them. The first part, obviously, Matt is going to share a little bit about the early days of ILCA junior sailing, kind of the driving forces. And we'll talk a little bit about Al, who had a little bit of a different story joining the Lightning class as more of a young professional, and kind of a little bit more about as a 22-year-old kind of joining the class for the first time. Then we'll get a little bit with Doug and Jeff about their early influences in sailing the Lightning, what motivated them. And then, you know, we're going to get the whole group together, open up your questions to the chat room, and hopefully you guys will have some information and have some questions for the team. They've all got really excellent stuff to share with us. So anyway, we're going to start here, and I'm going to start here a little bit with, pulled this right from the Lightning class website. And before I get into Matt, you see, these are all of our Junior North American champions. And the reason why I wanted to start there, the Junior North American Championship is only a couple of years, is coming up on its 50th anniversary. I think we're what, 4 years away from that. So 50 years of junior sailing in the Lightning class or having a championship, which is amazing. And you can't really see it down here, so I highlighted it in 1974 at the Cleveland Yahiteg Club, and that's one for you, Laura. I'm pretty sure it's a Cleveland Yachting Club. Matt Fisher from Columbus, Ohio was our first junior champion. So Matt, what I wanted to kind of do was pull you in here a little bit and sort of talk about the early days. You were involved with the first one, obviously you and Greg, and talk a little bit about what got you involved with the class and what kind of developed the first Junior North Americans.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And also thanks, Brian and Al, for putting this together. Hopefully this will be helpful. You know, first I just would say, and you see the first photo there, Greg and I were really lucky that our dad got us into the Lightnings at a very young age. And we both had our own boats, and we also were lucky in that we had a very competitive fleet at Buckeye Lake, which is just east of Columbus, Ohio. We had a couple guys who were traditionally in the Blue Fleet, one that was continually in the top 5, Jim Dressel. So we were always able to have some, post next to us that we could actually try to keep up with that would help our speed around the course and help with our boat handling. And also back then, and I hate to start sentences with back in those days, but back in those days, the Ohio district was actually very strong. We would get 45 or 50 boats at our district championships, at the Great Lakes championships. And there was a strong group in the Ohio district, including Jim, Jack Mueller, Chuck Maltby. You know, we really had a lot of people that we could go against when we were 14, 15 years old that would let us get an idea how fast we were going.
That's the other thing too, Matt, that's a big difference now, right? Now, not only the volume of boats, but the fact, and I think you mentioned it to me the other day, that back in that day, as a 15, 16, 18-year-old junior sailor, it was almost like the only show in town, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing is that there weren't, in our junior sailing, there weren't 420s or opties, and nothing against 420s or opties, but there really wasn't a laser till I probably got to be a freshman in college. So, we sailed lightnings when we were kids, and a lot of the folks that we're gonna talk about later all grew up sailing lightnings too. So that was the boat we sailed on Wednesday nights and on Saturdays to practice and on Sundays. So, and also, I just want to add this in that what our dad also made available to us was Buffalo Canoe Club was about a 5 or 6 hour drive from Columbus. And they always had a couple of regattas early in the year. And we would go up the day before the regatta and try to tune against some of the best people in the world, in the country. So, just similar to now where there's a couple world champions at Buffalo Club back in, 1960 through 1980. There was always a couple folks who had just recently won a major regatta. So that was very helpful too.
Not much has changed with the Buffalo Canoe Club in that regard, right? I mean, you
Right.
still want to go sail against talented people. So real quick, I mean, this picture that's up there, and I assume you can see it's your dad and yourself and your brother. And maybe you can share a little bit about the picture on the right, because this is, again, you guys are probably in your very early 20s at this point, but just the opportunities you talked about sailed against the best, right?
Yeah, I think the picture on the right, I'm pretty sure was the Snowball at our home regatta. And again, we would get 45 to 55 boats at the Snowball in October. And I think that was 1977. And that's Bill Shore on the left and Bruce Goldsmith on the right. And I just got to shout out to both those guys. They were our mentors. They were very helpful on and off the water. And we really looked up to them, and when we could go the same speed or finish near them in a race, we were very happy. But they were definitely the leaders of the class in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I think Bill won the Worlds in '85. So they were also around for a long time.
I think that's an interesting thing too, the mentor part about it. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we, it's still a term we use a lot, and reflect a little bit more on that later on with the rest of the team here. But let me just, so we're going to go to the next slide here. And this, maybe talk a little bit after the Junior North Americans in '74, which came off pretty successfully, obviously, for you and your brother. You guys kind of went through a thing as young 20-year-olds sailing, pretty major events.
Yeah, let me just I kind of skipped over the Junior North Americans, but the Junior North Americans were actually a brainchild of Jack Mueller and Bill Buckles. And they held that regatta at Cleveland the 3 days before the North Americans that were at Cleveland, '74. And we had 33 boats. And if you look through the list of folks in that group, many of them are still sailing the Lightning, and it's pretty cool to see. But that Cleveland North Americans the following week qualified us for Salinas, Ecuador, Worlds in 1975, which my brother Greg sailed with me then. And I will just say that was the regatta more so than the '77 NAs that kind of, pushed us into the top few folks, because Greg was always very good at trying to try different types of tune. And he pre-bent our mast probably 1.5 inches or 2 inches. And we really had good speed, better than what we'd even had before. We carried that from Salinas realistically into the following 2 years. And my dad sailed with me in the North Americans in '77, and we were fortunate enough to win by 1 point over my brother Greg, and I think he was 1 point ahead of Jay Lutz.
And a bunch of young guys back then, for sure, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is you guys. This is the famous 109.56, which ended up in another North American champion's hands a few years later, right? David Stark, I think, ended up sailing that boat for a few years. But
yeah, he owned it for a while. A bunch of people owned it for a while. So, yeah.
Matt, did that boat have hiking straps? Because it doesn't look like you guys used them.
Yeah, it's blowing about 18 there. No,
just checking.
That's
my. This might be the new thing, because he won. He won the regatta, so maybe that's the new look. Right. Yeah, that is actually from the '77 NAs, and obviously your brother and you on the right, featuring a little different look. But yeah, obviously the early successes. And I just want to really quick circle back to Bill and Jack, because if you think about 46 years ago, coming up with the idea of holding a junior North Americans in a incredibly established class like the Lightning, it was almost unprecedented. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot. People were sailing different boats, but to actually create its own kind of niche is pretty foresightful of them.
Yeah, it was. And I actually, sitting here now, don't know how many other classes similar to the Lightning class have a junior. Now we have women's, now we have masters the week before, which has really turned into an incredibly successful regatta. But that was Jack and Bill's idea, to the point where, maybe after a couple of cocktails, they also came up with the idea of a candy stripe flash, which they handed out at the awards banquet for the regular North Americans.
And thankfully, there's no stories associated with that. So we'll press on from that.
Everybody kept on.
Yeah. So, but obviously, the other thing I think that's striking, Matt, is you're still actively involved with the class and still be involved. This is you in 2009, and maybe you can reflect a little bit about your team and what this was.
Yeah, this was, again, I've been blessed to have a lot of talented people sail with me. We'll talk about that more and later in the program. But this is Dan and Toby Moriarty, and we made a goal, probably in the early 2008, that we wanted to win the Worlds. I mean, that's the way that Dan and Toby talked, and that they said this is our goal, for win the Worlds in Burlington. And so we put together a program for 2008 and 2009 and stuck with it. And it was a lot of fun. Very special week with a couple of very good friends.
Yeah, and just really, really good sailors. I mean, just it's also really goes to another point we'll talk about a little bit earlier about just connecting with the right people and kind of finding your time. There's a question on the chat room, and just so you guys know real quick, I'm just going to mention the chat room is open. If it's not open for you now, you're going to want to open it if you're interested. We do have 3 or 4 trivia questions throughout the webinar. And so the way it's going to work is very simple. We're going to give you a trivia question, and the first person to answer it correctly in the chat room, responding to everyone, will win a North baseball hat. So again, it's going to be the first correct answer in the chat room. And so if you want, you can just make sure your chat room's up. But we have a question from Ched Proctor. Do we have a copy of the World's results from 1975? I guess, Ched, you must have only done the Masters that year. So, but anyway, I bet you Laura can find him in the archive. And the other thing, and I know Matt and I are kind of, and even Albie are Lightning historians by a little bit, but all the 70 yearbooks, or many of the 1970s yearbooks, are scanned onto the website. And so I know when Matt and I kind of got involved with doing some of the history on this, we both kind of chased a lot of that stuff down by referencing the old yearbooks. But maybe Laura can hunt that down. So I'm pretty sure
says, Chad, I can fax you the page when we're done here.
Fax,
Yeah.
really, Matt? You're going to fax it?
Yeah.
So Matt, I actually have a question for you. So going back to the previous slide, I mean, you won the Junior North Americans, I think, what was it, 74, 75? And then you were the youngest winner of the North Americans there in the photo on the right. So, and it was what, that was in 77.
Yeah.
So in 3 years, you went from the Junior North American champ to, the actual champion, right? So,
Right.
I mean, how did you do that? And, in reality, I mean, what pushed you to want to do that? I mean, other than, I'm sure, looking at the photo there, you could see I can't tell if you're happier that you beat Greg or you won. I'm guessing it's a little bit of both.
It's
but,
possible that was
but
the morning after the banquet. Maybe that's the wrong thing to say on a junior seminar, but that was probably the morning after. But, Al, it's a good question, but I would say it truly was a series of goals. I was fortunate that I had my brother sailing with me in Salinas, and I will call that, I don't want to use the word launching pad, but we got ourselves to the point where we felt like between 8 and 20, we were one of the fastest boats upwind. So that we truly went to Sheboygan in 76. I don't want to say planning on winning, but you're a little cockier when you're 20 than when you're 60 something. So we wanted to win Sheboygan. We didn't. We kind of got our nose smashed in a little bit, but it made us reset a goal. And I was fortunate again to have my dad, who I thought was old at the time, but he was, I think, 49 years old when he sailed with me. And he was an incredible help too, a very good skipper brain with a lot of crew talent, just like Greg. So it was just, again, I won't be bashful to say we went into these regattas, trying to win them.
Cool.
Well, actually, it's another good thing too, is that, the 76 setback almost set you up for the opportunity to succeed in 77.
Yeah,
Get to some of that stuff.
You get upset with yourself. You try to reevaluate what went wrong, and I don't need to hash through all that, but it did help us get a little bit more hungry and try to push for Buffalo. And we love sailing at Buffalo Canoe Club too.
Awesome. All right, so I think this is our next trivia question. I'm hoping it is, if my memory serves me right. And so everybody, if you're ready with the chat room, again, the first right answer is gonna get a North hat set to them. And the question is, Matt Fisher, in addition to being a 3-time North American champion, has been runner-up a record 5 times as a skipper. Who does he share this amazing record with?
I really love this question.
And we already have a winner. And so all of you guys who said Ched were incorrect. Ched only wins North Americans. He's never second.
Or 5 Subways eaten.
Oh, right. But Super Dave Stark is the correct answer. Dave was second in 92, 02, 11, 17, and 19. Go along with his several North American wins. And Matt was a runner-up in 78, 84, 88, 08, and 12. So congratulations, Todd Wake. Todd, you could just take Doug's hat right there. And you can only win once. Give the hat to a more deserving person. Okay, we set the bar pretty low there, Todd. Everybody's more deserving. But anyway, we'll send it out to you because you jumped on it and enjoyed it. I appreciate you guys all weighing in. So we're going to kind of go to the next portion of this. And I kind of told you guys, you kind of broke this into 4 parts. And this was the Allan Terhune thing. And again, we were kind of trying to focus on junior sailing. And we got talking with Al a little bit. And Al, I think it's interesting because your introduction is different than the rest of these 3 guys. And it's kind of, I call it the unboat Brett story, because you decided at the early 20s as a young professional that you wanted to go sail Lightning. So maybe give us a little bit of your background. You see you there sailing your Flying Scot and kind of where you got to that.
Yep. And thanks, Brian. And it's true. I mean, I grew up on the Jersey Shore, but where the club I was from, we didn't sail Lightnings. It just wasn't what we did. And in past, my dad and my grandfather both were Lightning sailors, but when I was a junior in junior sailing, we didn't have Lightnings. The closest thing was a Blue Jay, I guess, but there was no Lightnings for later on. So, when I was in high school, middle school, we sailed Flying Scots, which you can see on the left, and that was my beautiful red Flying Scot that was built in 1962. It was boat 300. It still had the original winches and all that stuff, but that was kind of how I got into sailing. And when I got out of college, moved to Connecticut to start my not professional sailing career, but professional. I was working for a chemical company at the time. And when we moved to Connecticut, it was basically the Flying Scot was just something that I didn't really want to do. It was time for something else. And I remember talking to you and Greg about it. Greg was actually pushing more to sail Thistles at the time, and you pushed hard for the Lightning. And in the end, the biggest thing that pushed us over was the chance to sail in a world championship. So on that note, I decided to get a Lightning. And one of the funny twists of the story is, I'm starting to look for a boat, and what do? We find a boat, and I hop in my car, drive to Orlando, and get my first boat, Nichols boat from Fisk Hayden, who's Jeff's grandfather. And it was the same year that Jeff's dad won the NAs, and we had a good chat talking about the NAs when I was there, and I remember hooking the boat up and driving away, and we were off in 2002 with our, the risky business, the Nichols boat. And it was a funny story because I was right out of college, didn't have a ton of money, and we went to North Cape, kind of not really knowing what to do. And one of the funny stories, we get there, we're rigging the boat, and we're just kind of doing our thing, and someone who will remain nameless walks up, and they're like, "Man, this boat is a wreck." And I was like, "Well, that's good." And they're like, "Man, I hope you don't make the blue fleet in that boat or plan on it."
So
Yeah.
Al, real quick, Al.
Yeah.
Jeff is listening, and
Yeah.
this is the wreck of a boat you bought from his grandfather, right?
Well, that's what this guy said. I didn't think it was a wreck. I thought, dude, I spent every penny I had on that boat. It was not a wreck. So the person's like, yeah, I hope you don't plan on making the Blue Fleet with that boat. And the person walked away, and I remember talking to my team. I'm like, what's the Blue Fleet? Like, we had no concept of what was going on. So, but we were fortunate at that regatta. Mr. Fisher was very nice to, not Greg, talking about George Fisher. I still call him Mr. Fisher, but was very nice to loan us a main and jib for that regatta and kind of helped us, get through the event. And we were, fortunate enough to qualify for the Worlds at that regatta. And we had a, reasonable event. We did qualify for the Blue Fleet in the end. And, after that, we kind of put our heads down and a year later, we were kind of off to the races, basically.
So a couple of quick things, Al. I'm gonna circle back. You told us a story, and I want to pull it in a couple of parts. But one is, I think that the really cool part about your story. I mean, first of all, I want to point out the picture you say on the Flying Scot, and I mean, it obviously wasn't a state-of-the-art boat, even when you were sailing it when you were 15 years old. And you could see the big dent on the side, and and I'm seeing the jib sheeting and stuff like that. You just wanted to go sailing, and you hopped in whatever you could to go sailing. Yeah,
it was, if there was a will, there was a way, right? I mean, you scratch clawed your way to do it if that's what you wanted to do.
And I think it's interesting too, as a 21, 22-year-old kid, straight out of Kings Point, you decided you wanted to go sail boats, scrapped every nick he had, bought a $4,000 boat, and kept scraping it together because that's you came up with a plan, a goal, right?
Yep, that was what we did. Yep.
So that's what you decided. So a couple of quick things about North Cape you shared me, and I don't, hopefully you're not embarrassed about talking about them a little bit, but you told me about the awards banquet and how you guys had won the youngest, or the best first timer award, right?
What was it? The Themis Trophy, I think.
Smither.
Yeah. I don't.
Thermos Trophy,
Yeah, Thermos Trophy, right? Yeah.
Thermos, right? Sorry, and you guys, talk about rubbing nickels together, right?
Yeah, we were. I mean, we couldn't afford to literally go to the banquet, so we didn't buy tickets, and we were there, and we basically sat in the parking lot drinking all the beers. Everyone went to the banquet, and we literally went through the parking lot emptying people's cooler into our cars. So we drove to the banquet site. And we were drinking beer, and we kind of just ran in and grabbed the trophy because we were like, we're not spending money on banquet tickets, right? And that was our kind of intro to that. And we're like, oh, this is cool. And then we left, and on the way home, I remember being somewhere in Ohio, not very far from North Cape, actually, having to call my dad and be like, oh, you need to send us some money. We don't have enough gas to get home. So, but again, there was a will, there was a way. We kind of scraped it together and we'll
talk a little bit about the boat grade. I think after hearing that story from you, it's almost a little bit of a precursor of what you and Bill Festigi came together and about things. So a couple of quick things with the chat before we kind of slide on. And Sterling Bush made a good point. The answer to the juniors here online, and hopefully that will be the message when we're done, is people are willing to offer help and help people out. And that's the thing. And also, I saw Ryan put down 13,970. That was risky business, right? 13,970. So anyway, and Mark Allen also had a FIS boat. I think it was a Schneider boat originally, then a FIS 1138. So again, appreciate you guys weighing in and sharing your thoughts to everybody on the chat. So, but 2002 bled over to 2003, and 14 months after you bought a Lightning, or 15 months after you bought a Lightning, this happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we just kind of had the season where we could do no wrong, and we made, some, anybody who knows me knows I tend to way overthink this stuff, and made some really conscious decisions in the crew makeup for the boat, and got a different boat for the following year, and we went from a bigger middle crew to a smaller middle crew, and changed the boat up, and kind of made a few, decisions on how we were going to get better. And, we focused on, I was not into rig tuning. So we really committed to the Fisher Sail program at that point. And, one of the things I really decided was we were going to be faster by going downwind well. And that was one of the things we focused on. I'm showing a picture of us going upwind here, but we put in the hard work, and it just kind of fell into place.
I still take away from your story the fact that, just, diving into it, 21 years old.
Yeah.
You know, I have a little bit of a similar story. When I was about your age, I bought 10212, which was from a guy in New Hampshire. Didn't have nearly the success you had. I actually spent more time flipping that old Lippincott over with no tanks and bailing it out more than I care to talk about. But, you know, again, that was kind of the thing. Just go buy a boat and go sailing. And so it was pretty impressive. And here you guys are with, winning the North Americans in 2003 within 14 months. And again, we'll circle and talk a little bit about the boat grant. I kind of look at this as kind of a boat granty kind of story without the boat grant. That's one of the great things that the class has kind of put together. So
yeah, it definitely led to some of the motivation for it, for sure.
So anyway, we got to the history of some of the older guys in the class, two different stories of how they've had successful junior or young adult programs. I want to bring in our two champions, our current champions now, and I'm really appreciate them spending time. I know that both Jeff and Doug are kind of fighting their way through finals right now. Actually, I think Jeff just finished finals, and maybe Doug's got a few more to go. But there's Jeff on the left, and this is actually in Greece, and Doug on the right. That's Meredith with you. I probably had some North Americans, but I appreciate you guys. The first thing I want to do is kind of pull Jeff in here a little bit. So Jeff, you kind of been involved with Lightnings for a long time, would you say?
Yeah, I would say so. I'm the fifth generation Lightning sailor in my family, so it's really been a family thing that kind of brought me into it. I sailed my first major regatta that I remember in 2009. I did the front for my dad and bar. And after that, we actually sold our Lightning, and I played a lot of basketball through middle school and high school. And then we got a Lightning back in like 2014 or 2015. And I was kind of not enjoying basketball as much after that. I probably wasn't that good at it. So I really started to get into sailing after that. We had the boat, and I did the 2015 juniors, and really.
So real quick, before I slide on to the next one, this is real quick. It's your dad and your mom, Steve and Angie, and this is you in the Florida District Trophy. So this is a few years ago. So I stole that off your mother's Facebook page. So I guess I got to give her photo credit. So, but here's a little bit again. You know, you talk about coming through the ranks as a young sailor. That's probably the first race you won there on the left, right? Maybe.
Probably thought I was steering, but it wasn't really steering. And it's funny because this is actually the boat that Al bought from us just probably a couple months after this. And then the picture on the right is some of the best Hawaiian shirts, matching Hawaiian shirts, and the North Americans trophy that my dad had just won. And that was also another funny story when Al came and got the boat from us. I don't remember it, but my dad told me that Al walked in and saw the trophy and pointed at it and was like, "I'm gonna win that." So that was pretty cool. It was like, what, 15 months later you won it?
Yeah. And that is definitely the boat for sure. I remember that paint job and all the stuff. Yeah.
The fast red stripes.
Yeah.
So real quick, so we're going to actually make sure Doug's on the line. So obviously, Jeff, sorry, the tradition of your family, your 5 generations, your grandfather Fisk, who was a runner-up in 1976 in the North Americans, your dad who won the 2001 North Americans. But Doug, your family's been involved with the Lightning class, certainly not as long as the Haydens, but maybe you can share a little bit about these images and your growing up in the class.
Yeah, so the image on the left here, which I think is pretty funny, is me and my family at our first North Americans. So my first NAs was Albie's first NAs. I was just 2 years old at the time and was hanging out on shore. But yeah, you can see us with North Cape and the channel there in the background. So my mom had done a little Lightning sailing. And then once my parents got married, came to Sheboygan, they bought a Lightning sort of out of necessity. It was the one design boat here. Bought an old Nichols boat, kind of like Al did, and got into the racing. Kind of like Jeff, I had a period where I didn't really like sailing. So I didn't really restart until this regatta on the right. In 2012, it was the Hoosier Regatta at Lake Wawasee. So I crewed for my parents. It was super cold, dry suit weather, and the end of September, early October. And we had this epic tacking duel with George Sipple going up the last beat. And so after that, I was hooked and I got totally back into it. But yeah, my family's been obviously sailing Lightning since I was born. And I think it's, pretty cool to have parents and people around me.
Yeah, that kind of support. I guess the question that always would strike me from this picture is, how is it your father always seems to get the best parking spots at the North Americans for his boat? It's always closest to the hoist. And
in this one, he was parked next to all the people from Carlisle and North Cape. So maybe it was just, piggybacking off of Matt Burridge.
There you go. So, I mean, obviously you guys having the upbringing, having the family support, very similar to Matt, and like, don't want to say the Lightning was the only show in town, but it was certainly the one that your family's committed to. So Jeff, this is a little bit of the culmination of you guys. You went through a little bit of a route to get to where you guys were in Greece, but maybe you could share a little bit of your thoughts about the championship and maybe a little bit of the path of how you got there. I know you started mentioning earlier about the Rochester North Americans or Junior North Americans, and then you guys ended up at Matitaconk. So maybe share a little bit about your path, about how you guys ended up standing here in Greece.
Yeah, definitely. It started in 2016 at the Rochester Juniors. I had a team all set and ready to go, and my middle crew dropped out like probably a month before. And we were talking to Brian Sr., and he said, my son would love to do it. He's going to be there anyway. So we signed up Brian Jr. And it was really just we had no expectations going in or anything. It was really just a learning experience for us trying to get around the marks. It was survival at times for our forward crew, at least, who passed out. But anyway, from that, we went on to the 2017 Matitaconk Juniors, and I had Brian Jr. again. And then I had Hannah Sellers, who had been sailing with me at Florida State for my first year. And that one, we had a bit higher expectations. We thought we could really compete for that one. And we didn't even, I don't remember even thinking about it being the qualifier for the Greece Worlds. I mean, it was really just, we were going to try to win the Junior North Americans. We weren't really thinking beyond that. And then it was definitely a good regatta for us. I think the first 2 days we were leading. Going to the last day we were leading, and then we blew it and lost to Tanner Probst again, of course, thanks Tanner. But it was really a good kind of defeat and learning experience for us to kind of go through that, how we really thought we had it wrapped up and then kind of lost it on the last race. So it was really the opposite of what Greece ended up being. But then from that, we didn't really think we'd be able to go to Greece. We knew we qualified, but it was going to take a lot of effort to fundraise and get it all put together to actually make a run at it. But through all the generosity of a lot of you guys and U.S. Sailing and all kinds of donations and T-shirt sales, we were able to do it and get there.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the fundraising a little bit later, because I think that's an interesting aspect, and I think it all circles back to things that like even Matt and Al were talking about your determination to make it happen once you guys thought that the opportunity was there. And speaking of adversity, this is in Greece, and I was there watching you guys, kind of helping out with the class a little bit, and I think this is the second race, and maybe you could kind of talk a little bit about the first race and then where you were just about this moment and kind of a little bit about what, maybe about the adversity. So.
Yeah, well, we won the first race and we're feeling pretty good after that. And then this is in the second race, and as you can see, it's definitely blown like 25 or something.
Oh, it's not.
But, no, it was like a breezy 10.
No.
Breezy 10.
Yeah, it's a puffy 11.
Yeah. But anyway, we were in, I think, 4th or 5th, and jibing through the gate to do the reach leg to the finish, and just turned too fast, rolled too hard, and kind of flipped it right over, and then got to watch the whole fleet sail by, which was a little frustrating. And then we finally got it up and kind of submarined through the finish line, and looked at Brian Sr. on the spectator boat, and he was taking off his Gen 5 shirt and putting on a Buffalo Canoe Club shirt.
There you go. Right.
But anyway, it was a big disappointment for us. Obviously, we were frustrated, but we finished the race, and there was nothing we could do about it at that point. So we just kind of moved on and said that was our throwout, and we're gonna look forward to the next race. And we got a second in the third race of the day. So then we were just didn't really know what to think after that.
Back in the game. I could, I think it's interesting, again, we talk about all these hurdles they could put in front of you, and this is obviously a snapshot of what happened in one race and stuff like that. It's not as big of a hurdle as getting a boat or getting the support, but I think you guys, when we were talking about it during practice, is that you compartmentalized it, moved on, and were able to kind of put it behind you. And this is the finish of the last race in Greece, and obviously this is a couple days later. And having spent a little bit of time with you guys over there, there's obviously some disappointment coming out of the first day. And as you cross the finish line here, having won the world championship, what were your thoughts then?
Well, the points were super tight going to the last day. It was the throwout didn't come into play until the last day. So we knew we won the first race, which was the sixth race. We knew we had a throwout, so we knew the points were going to be pretty tight at the top, and maybe we'd be third or something like that. But then we won the last race, the seventh race, and thought maybe we'd be somewhere in the top two, or I was thinking like second by a couple points. And then Brian Sr. came flying over to us on a spectator boat and yelling about how we won. And I said, no, we didn't win. You don't know. You don't know what you're talking about. And anyway, we ended up winning. We didn't really believe it till we got in and looked at the board, but.
This is kind of what it feels like to come back from all that adversity, flipping over, having the struggles through Rochester, the disappointment of Petitcock, and then all you guys that victory dunking, which probably felt better than that second race dunking, right?
Yeah, it felt a lot better.
So it's a great story, and I think a lot of moving parts and pieces, which are very similar to both Al and Matt. It's that, there were always challenges. You guys hit roadblocks and came through and were able to pull it off. So I wanted to pull Doug in, and again, this is kind of the fourth leg of our platform here. And Doug, this is you and your team in 2 different years, right? 16 and 19. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your team and what's going on in these shots.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the left here is my my winning team from Rochester in 2016 with Noah, who you'll see in both pictures, and then Meredith, who you probably noticed was sailing with Jeff in the Youth Worlds. So really, we think she's sort of the common denominator behind really successful teams. Take that as you may. And then on the right here, we've got my team from this year, Noah and Lars. Our winning team. We won the Junior North Americans this year as well. So 2 very different teams and, really different setups, which we'll get into. But yeah, this is the end of 6
Pretty
years.
Exciting to join a very, very small group of 2-time Junior North American champions. I mean, there's some people have won it way lots of times, but there's a few people who've won it twice. It's a very select group. But I wanted to circle back to 2014, because this one didn't turn out as spectacular as you kind of hope, and you were kind of sharing with the 4 of us a story about what you kind of thought you might be happening and your expectations, and kind of building a little bit about how you got to your successful points.
Yeah, I don't like looking at this score sheet very much. If you look there, I'm in 11th out of 14th with kid Andrew I sailed with, and then Noah, who's been with me for the whole ride. We came into this event thinking that, we didn't think that we would win, but we thought that we could compete. And we dropped the ball. We're pretty disappointed in ourselves after this one, and we didn't know what exactly to think. But then, looking at the scorecard now, you see a lot of people in 12th crewing. You can see Lars, who won it with me, Parker, who's a killer sailor, and then you got Meredith sailing with Maggie up in 8th too. So there were a bunch of really good sailors, but, a tough event for us, and really kind of a blow to my first Lightning event as a skipper.
I think it's actually pretty interesting of all your stories. I mean, obviously Matt came out of the, kind of winning their first Junior North Americans, now kind of going through the cycle as well. But both you and Jeff have very similar stories where you kind of maybe didn't come out and do as well as you wanted to in your first couple. And I think it's pretty historic insofar as the teams that kind of stick together and start sailing lightnings when they're 14, 15, 16 years old, and stick with it long enough, they tend to have a lot more success. You're right. I see, the Grenauers and Robbie Robinson has done, extraordinarily well in sailing junior events and stuff like that. So basically, I think that the lesson I would take out of this as I'm a junior sailor is that if you keep working at it and digging at it and, and get the support, and the encouragement, you can meet with a bunch of success. So this is you guys. This is the 2016 team, looking a little happier probably than you were in 14.
Yeah, we're a lot happier because we have Meredith on the boat, of course. So it was really tough and a good year for us in 2016. We sailed the Youth Worlds in Salinas, and we sailed okay, but we felt like we could have done better. And then we came into Rochester for the Junior North Americans, which is my background as well. We came in guns blazing. We knew we were the favorites, and we knew we wanted to win. So we went to Rochester. We sailed a really strong regatta, one of my best regattas ever, and we came away with the title on that one. And that was, pretty exhilarating coming from only beating a couple boats, 2 years before that to finding ourselves on top of the podium in Rochester.
It's kind of a very consistent story. And here's 19. And real quick, I want to make sure that Art Petrosamoa gets a little bit of credit. I did email Art and kind of get a couple of really great shots. He's done a great job at being a bunch of lightning events and doing a bunch of photography for nautical photography. And Doug Wakes also contributed a bunch of pictures to this webinar, so we appreciate that. But a great shot of you guys. This is probably a little breezier than it was for Jeffrey in Greece, no?
Yeah, this was actually pretty windy. This was race 2 at the Junior North Americans this year. So for any of you that were there sailing the Masters or sailing the Women's, it was probably blowing 19 to 20 with big buffalo waves. And I don't know if my team are on, but we had a pretty epic run after this. We sailed by a bunch of boats, but 2019 was a totally different animal for us as a team because I was working pretty much a full-time job in Detroit for the summer and not really sailing lightnings at all. I went and crewed for my parents in the Worlds and Europeans in Finland, but didn't really drive any events leading up to it, didn't have any practice with the team. So it was, just completely different from 2016 in Rochester, which was the most practice that we had ever done. So Noah and Lars Osel stepped in and did a really nice job. Luckily, I sailed with Noah forever. We don't even have to talk to communicate on the boat. And Lars filled the middle role really nicely. We went out. The practice day was our first day sailing together as a team. And we managed to sail fast and consistent. And once again, 3 years later, Matt won a North Americans while I won another Junior North Americans. So we can't all be that special, but yeah, totally different event.
And actually, the thing you just brought up, Chet Proctor asked a quick question. It dials right in, and I'll bring it both to you and Jeffrey. And he's asking, how many days did you spend sailing together? And obviously, it changed with your teams. But prior to the NAs, and you just kind of answer that one. And maybe Jeff, you can answer the one about how much did you guys practice before going to Greece, and how important or not important was that?
Well, we only got to practice for about 6 or 7 days. We sailed the New Year Regatta in Sanford, and then we sailed the Southern Circuit St. Pete portion. So it was only like 6 or 7 days that we'd sail together. And then just me and Brian Jr. did the Connecticut, Rhode Island districts and got to sail with Ched doing the bow for us in 30 knots on a practice day. So that was a lot of fun too, but really not as much practice as we would have hoped for, but it was good practice.
It almost leads back to what the two of you guys also mentioned earlier, is that your teams, right? Things clicked and you guys kind of felt people that all the gears were working together. And so, obviously, practice does help a lot, but if you put together a talented, especially in a youth team, that everybody gets on the same page quickly. That can lead to success pretty quick. So Doug, the other question that Ched had is how fun was downwind that day?
Well, I mean, Ched had about as successful of a regatta at that one as we did. So that was really fun. We got up on one wave for that entire run, and it seemed like nobody else could catch him. And, sometimes you just feel like you're completely in the zone downwind, and we were having a lot of fun sailing.
I would have been scared.
We know.
I would have tipped over.
I would have flipped over 3 times and been scared.
Al doesn't need
doubt.
20 knots to tip over. He'll do it.
No, I can do that pretty much anytime. Yeah.
So real quick, we're going to get to another trivia question here before we get into sort of the meat and bones. I know we're going to probably be a little bit more than an hour, probably an hour and 15, hour and 18 minutes. So appreciate you guys sending in the questions. So we're going to get to the next trivia question. We tried to make this one a little bit harder. This one's definitely for people who have a historical perspective for the junior North Americans and junior youth worlds, but kind of sticks with the theme of what these guys were talking about perseverance. And the question is, who won the junior youth worlds the year after they finished 3rd from last at the junior North Americans the previous year, and then followed up the youth worlds win by winning the junior North Americans the following year? So again, this Lightning sailor finished 3rd from last in a 37-boat junior North Americans, and then went to the youth worlds and won the youth worlds. So
I can see
I know
the
you know
spike.
the answer now.
I can see the spike on the Lightning Class website and hear all the older guys flipping through their yearbooks right now as you're trying to figure this out.
Yeah. So yeah, we're not covering paper cuts. We don't cover paper cuts on this webinar. But so once we get the first correct answer, and we'll give you a minute or two, and then we'll move on. But for you guys, we'll wait for the first correct answer, and we don't have it yet, just so you guys know. But keep guessing at it. It's
you guys got to think outside
definitely
the box.
for the history buffs.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, we'll keep it up there, and we'll keep that question there, and we'll keep it there. I know the answer. You guys didn't know the answer.
I will be upset if Bill Bogardus doesn't get this one.
Yeah, Bill Bogardus is supposed to have this all in his annals of.
Yeah, I will be upset if he doesn't get it.
All right, so guys, Laura Jeffers, again, you can thank us for your spike in traffic to the Lightning Class website. While you guys are on the Lightning Class website looking for the answer to this question, you could pay your dues. So anyway, we are going to slide on this. You guys keep looking for it. Again, it's won the junior youth worlds after finishing 3rd from last, and then after coming back from the junior youth worlds, won the junior NAs. So the secret there is they won a junior youth worlds and a junior NAs. So we're going to slide on to the next one. But guys, one of the things we kind of touched on here a little bit is sailing with people you enjoy, putting together a good team and stuff like that. And I want to get the 4 of you back in, looped in a little bit now that we got the legs, the foundation, the table set, and get your thoughts about that kind of stuff.
Oh, there's one.
We have a winner.
We have the answer.
We have a winner.
We do have a winner.
Yep.
David Stark, Super Dave Stark, got the answer. The answer is Stephen Craig. Stephen was on a Fleet 35 in Dallas, Texas. He was actually the first youth world champion in 1978. In 1977, Junior North Americans finished 34th out of 37 Junior North Americans. Then came back, I think, in 78 and won the Junior North Americans outright. So again, kind of fits in with the story about perseverance, coming back from, learning from your mistakes and kind of getting through the juniors and coming out with some incredible titles. So some good guesses, all wrong except for David Stark. So again, hopefully you guys are kind of enjoying some of this trivia stuff and picking up some stuff. So you give the hat to Jody there, David. So anyway, let's circle back here. Let's sail a little bit with talking about sailing with friends and putting together a good team. And this is Doug and Noah. And I apologize, Doug. I don't know who the third is. I apologize.
Samson Kane. He's still one regatta with us, but it was a really good one. So
obviously, yeah, you guys sit there with trophies. And then this is Jeff, obviously a little bit with some of his teammates and people he sailed with. So you guys, maybe Matt or Al, you want to kind of weigh in a little bit about the teamwork and crew work perspective as a young sailor putting together a team? Because it can be challenging. I think the interesting thing before I give you guys the floor is that, with Jeff's unique situation now is that, Jeff is in Florida and Meredith was in Buffalo and Brian was in Connecticut. So it certainly made practicing a whole lot harder, and maybe something that, Matt, you guys didn't necessarily have to deal with in the 70s, right?
Yeah, back in the days when we just went to regattas in covered wagons and things like
that.
Right,
with donkeys pulling.
But we actually did sail with the local people from our club, and we spent a lot of time in the boat. We had races on Wednesdays and Sundays, and we probably practiced a couple more days beyond those, and we're up against tough people. So in my teens and up until actually the year we won the North Americans, we were sailing with local junior friends, to be in regattas, and we were always well practiced, well tuned. After that, though, where I've been fortunate, as I said before, is that, from a sailing standpoint, I've been fortunate to sail with some outstanding sailors and outstanding skippers, like Rob and Abby Ruhlman, Joe Stark and Ned Roseberry. I said Dan and Toby already, Wayne Pignolet, and now my son Stu. All these people who, we have fun with each other, on and off the water, and really enjoy each other's company. So I think that's an important part about having a good team.
And how about Jeff? Jeff, you and Doug, maybe you guys can talk a little bit about your experiences with your teams and the challenges of putting together, the junior program, and then, culminating that moving through the regular NAs and stuff.
Yeah, Jeff, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. It was definitely sailing with people that you like, and you can see this is all Florida State alumni at the Southern Circuit, I think last year or 2 years ago. And I mean, it really just adds to the whole experience of great teammates that are a lot of fun to be on the boat with and sail pretty well too sometimes.
Yeah, and you're not going to be sailing well if you don't have great teammates. So, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You surround yourself with really good people, and things seem to go more smoothly.
I think the other thing I've noticed too, and I know Matt, you could speak to it for sure, is that over the years is getting involved with junior lightning sailing is that the connections of the people that you grew up sailing with. I think, Matt, you kind of sent me a note about some of the young hotshots that are maybe not so young anymore that you grew up sailing against. They're still kind of doing it, right? And so you guys still have incredible connections.
Yeah, like when we were in our teens and early 20s, I mean, these are guys like Jay Lutz and, again, Greg, Larry McDonald, Matt Burridge. All these folks were at some of the first couple of junior North Americans and at Buffalo Canoe Club in '77. So yeah, it's been lifelong friends. So
this is a picture. This is in Greece with all the countries represented. I think it's kind of a traditional thing with the class to get all the youth sailors together and take their pictures underneath the flags. But Doug, especially you and Jeff, I know two of the things I want to ask you about are your connections currently with the other people you've been sailing against and with in the Lightning class. You guys have a technological advantage to those of us who use stamps and letters and total phone to stay connected. So does that make it a little bit easier to be connected with the folks that you've been sailing against and with?
Yeah, I mean, most of us are in just a giant group chat. We're always talking to each other. We're always staying engaged. And so it's really cool because we have this friend group from all around the country and the world. And, now we're affording an opportunity to stay in touch with them. I mean, we're not all as, you see Josh saying he just got a flip phone.
It's probably a rotary dial flip phone.
That's why I'm not friends with you. But, yeah, we're able to be completely in touch. Just last week we had a big Zoom call with a bunch of the Lightning Junior sailors, and we're always excited to see each other and go sail with each other, and team up with these friends that you might only see a couple times a year. But you have the option of making these plans super easily.
And Brian, to me, just watching, or seeing, look at this photo and think about it. I mean, I haven't sailed Lightnings for a few years now, but you still stay in touch with the people that you sailed with, right? And that's one of the things I think the class really has working for it. And that Doug and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's why the younger people stick with it and kind of keep going, is because you build this network of people. And even when you're not sailing per se, you're still part of the family and talking, and you're always kind of there, right? And I think that's the one part of the group that needs to get discussed, and kind of has been passed down through the generations. That's just what we do, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're there or not at the time, right?
Let's say I'm also struck with the Lightning class. Obviously, I've been with it for a long time. I never really did the junior sailing because at that time it wasn't as accessible for me. But seeing the relationships that these guys still stick together, and the camaraderie, and largely the sportsmanship. I mean, this is in Greece. This is Jeffrey all about to get indoctrinated. But the thing that struck me, and there's a bunch of pictures from this particular event, these guys getting thrown in the water, but just the excitement and joy of all the competitors. And I mean, they were genuinely happy that the event kind of got sailed fairly, and the champion was named. I guess my point was that nobody felt cheated out of it. Everybody had a spectacular time, and I think that Jeff, you're probably still on group chats with a lot of these guys, or different connections to stay in with a lot of the folks. I know that Brian is, for sure.
Yep, definitely. And I like that Jen is pointing out where to throw me, right on the chain.
Right on that rock, right?
Right on the rock.
Yeah. So, but it kind of segues a little bit into what Matt and Al and I have been talking a lot recently, and this new craze, I would say, for lack of a better description, the strength of our under 30s. And I'd like to hear from Al and Matt first about kind of their thoughts, insofar kind of,
I mean,
seeing the encouraging part of being the under 30 group.
I mean, I think it's one of to me, the highlights of the sport that's not necessarily talked about. And it's not just, I mean, I think it's the Lightning class leading the way on this front, right? I mean, to me, this is where the sport needs to grow, is the under 30 group. And I mean, I think this is super encouraging. This photo is awesome.
And
this isn't the Wild Oyster, sorry.
Yeah. If I could just jump in, I'd just say that, the class should be proud, because there's just not one initiative that you can point to. Certainly the boat grant initiative helped, but just a lot of the homegrown efforts that people have had. The Lightning class is doing very well on attracting people under 30, both at this regatta and at the North Americans in Buffalo. But, I actually, similar to Al, probably took 2 years off from my time for sailing the Lightning till this Charleston regatta, and everybody said, well, what looks different in the class? And I said, I got about 35 or 40% of the people here are about 40 years younger than me. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Or more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so this is Charleston. Again, I think the North Americans too, Doug and Jeff, you guys are both there. I think that was something that kept getting mentioned, right? I think of guys like Ryan Davidson, who's a legacy program sailor, that's sailing his own boat now, and we'll talk in just a second about the boat grant. But there was just a ton of folks, and I actually give a lot of credit to the junior program, and the junior sailors are that have come through the group, and just how they've been really focused on keeping people involved. So keeping the young sailors involved and keeping them engaged. Jeff, I think a lot of what you've done with Florida State and bringing those sailors into Lightnings, they never would have done that had you not kind of engaged them. And they're having fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and they're sticking with it too. Always wanting to sail the next regatta with someone.
Right. I remember you were mentioning, Raphael sailed with Bill all the time, right? And got kind of
and he's been doing Ethels too with them, so.
Right, just a tremendous opportunity. We'll talk a little bit about that. So we're going to get on to the next trivia question before we get into the final meet. Again, we're probably going to go about 15 minutes long. I apologize. Hopefully it's okay. But real quick, I do want to, before I go into that, get your chat box open for the next question. Sterling Bush says, you don't have to be a hotshot sailor, stay connected with the class. Some of us have been with Lightnings for 50 plus years without winning a top prize. And I think that's the real meat of the class. And hopefully a lot of these guys are going to be sailing with the class for 50 plus years. I know Sterling and Bob and, sailing on Fred was sailing on Susquehanna, a lot of tradition in the class. It's been great for that. So, and Dan McLaughlin sailing 14,484 after 11,077, like me, kind of grew up sailing Blue Jays. So anyway, and So real quick, and last year's ACCs, right? We had a bunch of junior sailors. So just been great for the class. And again, my hat's off to you guys. So next trivia question. How many junior North American champions have gone on to win the NAs? And both Jeff and Doug insisted I put in so far. So I guess that's on their list. So the first person who gets it right, and people just typing arbitrary numbers in. And that's amazing. So far, we haven't gotten the right one.
Bob Shapiro.
Bob Shapiro. Yep, that's right. Yep. Bob Shapiro. And
7.
Yep, it is 7. And we have Matt Fisher, Jay Lutz, Jody Lutz, Mark Bryant, David Stark, Larry McDonald, and Andy Horton. So 7 junior North American champions have gone on to win the NAs. Doug and Jeff, so far, right?
Soon enough.
So far. Okay. So we're going to get on to the next thing, and I'm going to bring Allan pretty deep in. It really just spend a few minutes again, but we talked a little bit about the unboat grant program, and I think this has been a huge part of where we are now with the under 30 crowd. So maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about where we're at.
The boat grant started, I guess, 14 years ago now, and it was a lot of back and forth for about a 2-year period with Bill Fastigi and I talking about this, and he kind of pulled me aside because I guess 14 years ago, let me do the math, I was 27, and we were kind of talking about how there weren't that many under 30s around, as Matt was saying, and what we were going to do. And we did some research on the ILCA fund, which was there and had some money, and talked to a few people and tried to figure out how to get a program like this off the ground. And, the first time we pitched it to the governing board, there was some skepticism, but there was a lot of support, and we kind of pressed forward at the same time. And I believe it's the San Diego NA is where we proposed it to the open class. And, it was met with probably a 60-40 support at the time, but we trudged ahead and launched it the following year. And we had 4 boat grants that first year, more than we thought we were going to have. And, funny story is, I'm pretty sure Debbie was involved with the very beginning too, with Bill and I. And I remember the first weekend we sent the first 2 boat grant boats out. This is the very first weekend. And on Sunday we did a follow-up call, and Bill and I got on the call, and Debbie was on, and we're like, well, how'd it go? Or there was 3 teams. And we're like, Team A had a car wreck with the boat grant boat, and the trailer's in an accident. They found out the license plate wasn't working. It's a mess. And the second team called up, and they're like, we lifted up the boat at SSA and didn't know how to use the lifting strap, and we broke the rig. And the third team was like, we went to go sailing and we flipped over. And we were like, what did we do? Like, what a disaster. And, but really from there on off, it was like, it was just off to the races. And I think it was something that was necessary just to give some kind of outlet. And, not only for the younger folks, I actually think it was really good to engage the older members of the class to realize that it needed to be a priority, to help the younger guys. And you didn't necessarily even have to do it through the boat grant program. I think it kind of created a groundswell of the class, growing and realizing that we needed the young people. And, Matt can jump in for sure. And we can all talk about how the one thing the class does well and through the ages is having mentors. I mean, he showed the picture of, Bill Shore and the Bruin there and how they were pushing down. And there were different people when I got in the class that were willing to help out. And now I'm sure, Jeff and Doug and people in their generation talking about, old guys like me and Matt, hopefully helping them out. But that's one of the things that kind of kept the whole thing going. So, I mean, to me, I think it was a turning point that, or at least one of the turning points that helped push younger people a little bit. And I don't know, hope it helped. It seems like it did.
Yeah, so obviously you guys see it's 14th year of the boat grant. 128 sailors have been involved with the boat grant in one way or the other as part of a team or part of a thing. 41 teams have received grants. I think, Al, I remember, being part of the executive committee back then, and I probably still have binders in my office with all the applications full. So hopefully I know that they, under Greg's tutelage and a bunch of other people dedicated with the boat grant program, and obviously your and Bill's foresight, it has been a great path. And we kind of started with your section of being the unboat grant guy, where you're 22 years old and bought your own boat, and class saw the path that we need more Al Terhunes and we need more opportunity for people. So It's just, it's been a great thing. And I know Laura mentioned, if anybody, the program has been, I want to say almost self-funded, but, obviously you're always looking for opportunities so that we can continue to keep it supported and expanded. They're putting a new boat in the rotation this year and really working hard to make the opportunities available for anybody on this call or anybody who might be 22, 23, 24 years old, looking to get into a Lightning and looking for the opportunity. So anyway, so we'll move on a little bit, but again, Al, I appreciate you and Bill putting this together. I did want to put this in because I think it is an important part of where we are right now with the opportunities for young sailors. So.
And Brian, I just want to echo what Al said too, that the numbers are impressive, 128 people over 14 years, but I also think just it has changed the culture of the class to be looking out and helping the juniors, and I think that's key that we maintain that.
I think there's one note here on the thing. Any thoughts on getting teens interested in sailing Lightnings or whatever? And I think I'd like to kind of touch on that here in these kind of like takeaways. We're kind of towards the last slide or two. And we went through all these things. We had talking points. And I was trying to make bullet points about all the stuff I heard you guys and all the stories you were talking about. I think the first thing that I took about from all of you guys is that motivation and trying to find out what was motivating you. And the interesting thing was all of you guys, when you're telling your story, especially about the times that your successes may not have matched your expectation didn't match your successes, not sailing your best and getting, what's the right word? Aggravated, disappointed in yourselves. I mean, and so the other thing I took away about all of our talks is how competitive all four of you guys are. Just that drive to be your best and find a path to be successful. And the other motivation is losing, right? And I think that kind of something echoed with all your stories, whether it was Matt Sheboygan or Doug Sheboygan. Maybe you don't want to go to Sheboygan if you're a junior sailor. No, I'm just kidding. And Jeff's Rochester. All these stepping stones to not meeting your expectations and trying to get to where you want to be. You guys kind of agree that that's kind of a motivating part of it?
Absolutely. You got right.
Guys, just leave me hanging here. I'm throwing you a bone. I'm teeing it up here.
I mean, Brian,
you said it so well. We don't want to repeat.
Well, the only thing I would add, Brian, is it's not necessarily, at least I know, more for me than, and I'm sure these guys would say the same. It's not necessarily losing that's the issue. It's giving it your best foot forward and knowing that you played the game well, right? I mean, you're not going to win every event. You know that, but the disappointment lies where you just didn't do it as well as you could have, right? And that means you can play the game perfectly and still get beaten, right? I mean, and I think that's the one thing that kind of gets lost in the goal setting and thinking it through. It's not necessarily getting first. Let's put it
I think one of you guys were telling me a story the other day about maybe, the feeling of accomplishment, finishing fourth, versus second sometimes, or, where you came from behind and you had no chance and you came out of the thing and you were fourth and you're like, wow, that is absolutely the best we could have ever done. And
yeah, I'll jump in on a couple different things. First, yeah, I've had some fourths and fifths that felt exponentially worse than any second. So, but beyond that, one part I don't know that we've hit, and I just got to make sure I blurt this out, is just, I will be one to confess that I have put a lot of time into the boat, especially in the junior years, just a lot of hours in the boat. And with the family that I grew up with both my brother and my father, just spent a lot of time one-on-one. And I just want to call out or reach out to the people that are still on the phone and just say, keep that culture of tapping us on the shoulder in the parking lot and say, would you mind going upwind with me before the start of this race? Just to get, I don't think there's a whole lot of things with sailing that's more valuable than tuning against other folks that you have respect for. And I will say, behind my dad, the person who I've probably gone upwind against is Dave Stark. We've traditionally driven up to Buffalo and tuned with David for hours and hours and hours on end on many weekends in the late, I'll say the early 90s and mid 90s. So, I think that's what it takes to kind of develop time in the boat and try different things, from pre-bend to jib halyard tension. But that's, going back to what it can, everybody can take away from that is the time in the boat and being able to tap people on the shoulder to ask them to go upwind with you before they start.
Segued right into those bullet points, Matt. That was awesome. Thank you. And that's, kind of a little bit about those next bullet points, right? Practice and sailing against the best, just sailing, right? Just sailing and getting on the boat. You guys all mentioned about sailing with people you really enjoy spending time with. That was one thing I came away with. And then, Jeff, and then I'll go to Doug. You guys both talked about, especially at your point of learning all the positions, sailing all the positions. And maybe, Doug, you can kind of touch on the importance of why you felt that that's something that really helped you.
Yeah, so I mean, most of my lightning racing coming up, I was crewing for my parents. I was doing the middle for them, and then I actually just did front for the first time this year. But I think it's incredible how much you can learn when you don't have to focus on exactly where the boat's pointing or not hitting anybody. When you're sitting in the middle, you can take a lot of time to look up at how the main looks. You can take the time to look at how the jib looks and really internalize how everything's working with the boat, as opposed to, if you get thrown in the driver's seat, it can be difficult at first. And similarly, it's a lot easier to get experience sailing when you're doing that. I think it's important for young sailors that they go out and find any opportunity to sail, especially on lightnings, regardless of what position they're doing. You just need to get on the boat and you need to go sailing, and that's how you're going to learn. And it's really a great way to learn from the good people, is to crew for them.
And Jeff, you've done a bunch of that, right? I know you've sailed with Bill Mock and obviously your dad, but you've done all three positions as well. And I think that you mentioned how that's kind of helped you understand better how to make the boat go better.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten to sail with some really good people and do all the different positions. And I think it really helps if you know what the front crew is going through and you know what the middle crew is going through. It really helps just the boat handling aspect and the whole team aspect. And if you can really put yourself in their shoes, and even better if they can put themselves in your shoes too, it really just helps the whole team.
Actually kind of slides over to these important lessons. I'm going to start with the bottom one first. I'm going to get both Doug and Jeff because you mentioned sail with whoever will ask you, right? Or whoever asks you, have you and ask for the ride, right? Oh, you going to say something?
Yes, so a funny story about that. So I will confess, I've only crewed in a Lightning one time, and the one time I got asked to crew on a Lightning was by Tom Allan Sr. to go to the Borderline Regatta, and we went down there, and I remember halfway through the first day him telling me how I was the worst crew he had ever had. And after that, I don't think I've crewed in a Lightning since. Actually, he was pretty adamant that I didn't look good enough, and I was really bad at trimming the spinnaker. So that was my last Lightning crewing experience.
So all of your successes we owe to Tom Allan Sr. because we got you into your proper role. But
yeah.
Anyway, Doug, I want to bring up the thing about sail whoever have you. You guys both mentioned just get out and sail with people, ask for the ride. And I think Sterling Bush and both Joe Bukowski, they kind of said giving Junior the opportunities is a start, have fun, get people into it and stuff like that. But Doug, you were mentioning a story about sail with whoever will have you, whether they're the best or maybe not an NA caliber or world caliber champion sailor.
Yeah, so I was coming up, and in 2015, I was a good Lightning sailor, but I wasn't anything awesome. And, my parents were going to sail the worlds that all these guys were at the BCC. And I basically had my dad and asked Laura, and we said, I'm going to be in Buffalo anyways. I'd really love to sail. And I ended up sailing with a guy named Jeff Davidson, who's an expat from Nigeria, from the Lagos fleet, and his son Ian. And I got to be honest, we had no business sailing in that regatta. Those of you that were there know it was windy, square waves. We tipped over and broke a mast. It was really rough, but it was an opportunity for me to go out and sail and learn about the boat, and I think it made me better. I came out at the Junior NAs that year and almost won the event, and I attribute a lot of that to going and getting third to last at the Worlds. We were just fighting not to get last overall.
Yeah. It's that goes to goal setting, right? I know that we had got circled around a lot of this stuff, but it's funny you were mentioning you got involved with 3 other boats, and your goal became don't be last, right? For that particular event.
Us
And
and a
everybody has their
Canadian team
goals.
and another Nigerian team, and we were just duking it out, and we won the battle of the bottom three, and that was huge for us. My team was thrilled at the awards banquet that we were able to get the other Nigerian guys.
Yeah. So, and so the other important lessons that you guys were mentioning, and I'm going to circle to Jeff, is, asking questions. And I know Matt and Al both mentioned mentors, asking questions and try new things. And maybe Jeff, you were mentioning some ways that you've kind of found that this kind of approach works for you.
Yeah, you told me a couple of years ago to not be afraid to change anything on the boat, and that really changed my mindset of where, to read the tuning guide and use it as a guide, but understand what we're looking for in the sails and the setup and the fuel in the helm and all of that. And I think a lot of people will get stuck on, it's got to be this number, it's got to be right where Ched was set or something, and it's so relative to so many things. So I think that was a big turn for me to just be able to say that this is what I want, and I think I need to do this to change it and not be afraid to make the change.
It almost circles back to Matt, you and Greg back in the 70s, right? I mean,
yeah,
different thing but
we didn't, we had some semblance of a tuning guide, but Greg was always a little bit gutsier than I was, because at that time we used Murphy knife sail from Bruce Goldsmith, and Bruce was not pre-bending. And I know to everybody on the call right now, pre-bending is something that's just built into the guide, but we were the only ones doing it, but it allowed us to trim in a little bit more and point as high as a lot of the folks who we thought were the fast ones. So yeah, I wasn't as much of I would try to stick to what the like Bruce was doing as much as I could, but Greg was a little bit more aggressive on trying some things that he thought would make the main look better.
I think an important lesson about that, I think, that is that, you kind of follow the tuning guide, which I think, a lot of the sailmakers have done a really good job in a lot of different classes with tuning guides, but really starting to understand the cause and effect of what's happening, what the pre-bending does. And I think that's the Lightning class is certainly a boat that enables a young sailor to be able to take that, learn from it, and transfer it to other classes.
And I think another point of that for me was just in college being able to sail a whole bunch of different boats, and high performance boats and boats with carbon mast and swept-back spreaders and stuff like that, and then just transferring what I learned from that tuning and that sailing style to other boats. And I think you get a little takeaway from every boat that you get to sail.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. So many people grow up sailing like Club 420s and FJs, with the rigs set. And I think, all the guys on this call would probably agree that it was really important that, we have this understanding of what mast butt position, what step position does, what forestay length does, what tightening or loosening your lowers does to the sail plan, so that you can, sort of intuit that rather than having to just read a guide and trust it.
Yeah, I mean, it's lots change, and it's lots take saying. I know we got into a little different discussion, which we won't bring into this one, but Dan McLaughlin's mentioning a boat was very different in the 70s, and certainly the opportunities to make some advancements when the oval mast came in 75.
Yeah, I think 75.
75, and we started bending the mast, and it gave us a lot more opportunities to make adjustments that now we're kind of regular kind of stuff. So the other thing I want to mention real quick, and you guys we circle around it, but if you don't get it, copy the good guides until you do, right? And so Jeff was mentioning Ched, or or who you kind of make sure you're doing what the good guys are doing until you understand why. So if you're going upwind and you're 15 years old and you're watching Doug Wake do something and he's going faster than you, copy Doug until you figure out why he's doing it. You're 17 years old, you're 70 years old, and you're trying to figure out what you're trying to do to go faster, and you can't figure it out. Just copy until you do get it. So I think that's one thing that I would take as a lesson for any age, that you want to get better at it. And you're not quite sure what the cause and effect of what the new things are doing, what changes you're making. And I will say that Jeff mentioned, I mentioned to him, make a change. Chet Proctor always told me it's okay to make a change, just make one. Because if you make one change and see what that does, if you make 4 changes, you're not sure what change did the right thing. So real quick, we're going to wrap this up. We have one more trivia question.
So
Yeah,
Brian, I actually got a couple questions that people are asking just for random info about these guys. So that got texted to me actually. So and Brian, you can answer this question too. Matt, I kind of know what your answer is going to be, so I want you to think outside the box here a little bit. But one of the questions I got for everyone on here is, what is your favorite place to sail and why? I kind of know your answer, so I want you to think a little broad. But what if you were going to lightning one regatta, where would it be?
So who are you asking? Who do you, all 4 of us?
All of you, but we'll start with Matt. Yeah.
Matt?
Well, everybody knows the Buffalo Canoe Club, but I actually like sailing in New Orleans too. I just like the whole scene. We sailed a lot there in college sailing. The North Americans 5 years ago were a lot of fun. It can be crazy at certain times of the year, but I'm always a big Buffalo Canoe Club fan.
How about you, Doug? Favorite place to sail?
Biscayne Bay. I love sailing in Miami.
Oh, okay. How about you, Jeffrey?
Same thing, Miami. Yep.
And Albie, your favorite place?
I'd say of all the places for lightning sailing, I would probably say, I don't remember the name of the place, but where we sailed the worlds in Chile in 2007 or 6 or wherever that was. That was probably the best lightning place.
Paco Solo likes Salinas.
Wait, that's my true second place is Salinas. That is the 2A to sail, maybe 1A.
Yeah. Brian?
Well, I'm trying to think, so many, Squam Lake, Carr Lake, but probably St. Pete. I know that it's probably where I've been the luckiest, and it's a lot like sailing in Long Island Sound where I grew up. There's a lot of current and goofy winds and tricks and trade, and I've proven you don't have to be incredibly talented to do well there. So it's kind of a great mixed match of anybody could win. So Debbie's proven that, right, Debbie? You're still with us? She'll be the first one to tell you that. But in any case, I like St. Pete because it's challenging, it's weird. I think the club is awesome, and I really like the vibe there. So anyway, real quick, I'm going to wrap it up. I apologize for everybody going a little bit long. These guys, like I said, we got 4 really talented sailors on the call with just a lot of information about what got them successful. Kind of get these bullet points at the end, and we kind of asked, Doug and Jeff specifically, what their long-term goals were. And I think, first thing they both mentioned was continue to be involved in the class. Doug, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know you've been involved in the governing board for a long time and we're a fleet captain. I'd love to hear your thoughts about getting involved as a young sailor in the class.
Yeah, so I think it's, our class leadership, we love our class leadership, and we're super thankful for all the volunteers that, come out and have been on the governing board for a while. And it's really important to keep these people as a backbone of the class. But at the same time, we all have to place some priority on engaging young sailors and keeping them in the class. And so I sort of took it upon myself, and now Jeff has as well, to join the governing board and be involved in class leadership. We're very in touch with people our own age. We know why we love the Lightning, and we prepared ourselves to contribute to the structure of the class. And so, I encourage the young people on this call, get involved, run for, fleet captain election. If you run, you'll probably get elected. Think about joining the governing board. There are a lot of positions where you can become intimately involved with the future of the class. And that's an investment not only in others, but it's an investment in something that hopefully you really enjoy. So, the class structure is why there's value for all of our boats. Otherwise, they're just a bunch of chunks of fiberglass. And so as the class turns over to us, I hope that people get involved sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think that's true, Doug, too. Especially, I think the class is really receptive to having folks like you and Jeff and any younger folks who have, interest in promoting. I think that one thing I've learned from being involved with the executive committees, the more voices we have, the different demographic, the more successful it'll be in the long term. So by a show of hands, who'd your long-term goal, who'd like to win another NAs or their first NAs? By a show of hands. And how about a Worlds? Show of hands. And having fun. So we're going to get to the last trivia question. Sorry, guys, long day. So last trivia question is going to come up. This is a two-part question, okay? And you have to answer both parts in the same chat thing. So you can't answer the first part and then leave it blank. If you get the first part and don't answer the second part, your answer is invalid. So it requires two answers. And the question is, Jeff and Doug have had great success in aligning both of them, like many of us, have a goal to one day win the North Americans. If they do, they would join their dad, Steve and Todd, on the championship trophy. At this point, there's only one family who has a parent and a child that have won the North Americans as a skipper. Who was the North American champion in offspring to win the NAs? And this pair also hold the distinction of being the only two skippers in the Lightning class to do this at the North American Championships. Go. Let's see if we can get anybody. Well, that was easy. Okay, well, that's so much for Lightning trivia. Angie Hayden's exactly right. Yep. Tom Allan and Tom Allan Sr. are the only two to have both won the North Americans and
we need the second part,
I didn't
right?
get the part. Yeah, sorry.
We got the second part.
Hey, you need the second part.
Sorry,
No,
I'm sorry.
it's
Yeah,
a
okay.
two-part.
Yeah,
It's a two-part question.
Capsize is wrong. Oh, what they hold the distinction as, you got to put the both names in. I gave you the Tom Allan part. That was easy. What other distinction they have? The only two skippers to do what at the North Americans? I'm pretty sure that capsize is not the answer. Not boat builders. I'll give you the hint is that if you get this, everybody will be green with envy. Bill Bogardus is it. Tom Allan Sr. and Tom Allan Jr., the only father-son duo who both won the North Americans and won the President's Cup. So again, thank you guys for joining on. So I want to thank Doug and Matt and Albie and Jeffrey for spending so much time. You know, we do put a little bit of effort into trying to organize these webinars that are fun and informative, and these guys made it really easy because they had such great stories to share. So I appreciate all of you guys being on. Any last thoughts, Doug?
Thanks for having me. And, you know, if anybody's looking to get junior sailors involved, to become involved with the class, you know, reach out to any of us. We're all pretty easy to get a hold of. So please, you know, we're always happy to talk about sailing at this time.
And Jeff?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hoping to see you guys at the North Americans if they happen.
Yep, let's keep our fingers crossed. Albie, appreciate you helping out.
Thanks, Brian. I just want to go on the record that Doug did not win $50 from the bet from yesterday for this talk. Just saying.
Thanks,
right.
Brian and Al, for pulling this together. It's a lot of work on your guys' part. We really appreciate it. The class loves it.
Well, I appreciate everybody for being here on the class. I think Laura, come on, stop. Laura Cristomo, who's our behind the scenes producer of these things, she kind of made a note that all of these are going to be available on the North YouTube page. And so if any missed it, or if you want to send it on to somebody to listen to that you think might be interested in junior sailing, or just planning a program to try to get a little bit better and get into the heads of these guys, feel free to go to the YouTube page. So again, be safe, everybody. We hope to see you on the race course really, really soon, and appreciate everybody for weighing in and being here today.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.